Hey friends, it's Derek at TCI and I'm back for another network install. The boys have already been at this job site and they're currently tearing a bunch of wire out and they're running some fresh wires. We're getting roughed in right now. And so I'm a little bit behind schedule here. We need to get this wall ready. So I wanted to show this one to you guys in particular because I know you've been following my videos where we install different types of wall racks. And this one is concrete. So let me get you up in the ceiling so we can take a look at what we're dealing with. Get our extendo ladder up, get me up, open the ceiling up, and let's just take a look at what we've got to work with. So if you've encountered this before, this might be a little bit intimidating, but when it's something that I encounter, I actually love to see this. Nothing is as secure to anchor to as concrete's going to be. We even have concrete in the ceiling, so this is going to be really good for anchoring J-hooks and rolling our service loop. So I'm kind of excited about this. But you got to have the right tools. So before we go any further and get this wall ready, why don't we go shopping? Follow me. Here we are at the hardware store. If you'd told me when I was 9 years old that I'd want to spend all my time here, I wouldn't have believed you. But that's what growing old does to you. Let's get in there. First thing we're going to need to do is pick out our backer board. We're looking for one that's nice and thick, so I'm going to go with this 3/4 inch ply right here, and I'm going to use the one that has a sanded finish on it so that it will take paint. Next up, I need to get some concrete screws. For drilling into concrete and fastening screws, you have to take a quick look at the type of head shape. If you look here, this one is beveled. That's meant to secure a 2x4 or other thick piece of wood directly to concrete. But we're going to be using washers. So we're going to go and look over here for some pan head style concrete screws. Speaking of washers, I'll find some with the right diameter and add that to my cart as well. Okay, I've transported everything back to my office. I don't normally bring material like this directly to the job site. I like to do a little bit of prep work in the safety of my own office whenever I can. So we're gonna paint this up and then we're gonna pre-drill some pilot holes. I'm just gonna get it on the dolly real quick and then I'll see you upstairs. Okay, we're upstairs in the office. What we're gonna do here is get this board prepped for painting. So first thing I'm gonna do is take this here washer and mark off my spots on the corners of this backer board. Now, one of the nice things about concrete walls is that the whole wall is a stud, so I don't have to worry about where I put my pilot holes because it will always work out. The only thing that I'm really concerned about is not getting too far away from where the edge of the wall cabinet will be. So I try to put myself in the corner as much as possible. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is put a couple of extra pilot holes, and that's to secure the wall cabinet itself. After it's on, I'll already have some holes through. And I like when I'm in a concrete environment, I like to get a couple of Tapcons through the back of the actual wall cabinet itself, just for some extra clamping force, just to be sure that we're that much more securely on top of the wall and that we're not just relying on short wood screws that are only in like the 3/4 inch depth here. I'd like to be in a little deeper than that for safety reasons. I don't want this thing to fall off the wall. So I'm gonna mark my spots real quick and then we are gonna get started painting. All right, here we go. Okay, with the wood chips vacuumed up so they don't get in my paint, I'm going to start my 5-in-1 tool, get my bucket of paint going, and then I'm just gonna give this thing 2 coats. It's enough that it'll blend in with a white wall, and if the wall is not white, where it ends up ultimately living, it makes for a great primer for whatever color they ultimately choose for the backer board to be. As you saw on the job site, the wall was white, so this will just get 2 coats, no problem. I'm going to paint that up right now. I don't use spray paint because spray paint has a little bit of a different finish. You can tell that it is not the same material as regular latex paint that most walls have, and it stands out just enough that it kind of bothers me. However, if that's all you've got, go ahead, use that. When you've got a big old wall cabinet covering most of the board, it won't really matter. Okay, time to paint. Okay, that's 1 coat down. I'm going to give it another coat, and then we'll transport it onto the job site. All right, I'm back here at the job site, and I've waited until it is Saturday because I'm going to be making some noise. So I just want to check on the progress of the guys. So the team did a pretty good job. They've got the face plates connectorized, and they've got everything cleaned up on this side of the office where they were working in the previous shop. So I'll take you down the hall just a ways, and you can see a couple of pieces of this project that we're working on now. So right in here will be a conference room. So the conference room, as you can see on the floor, there is a pipe system here. And this pipe system is connected to this pipe system. So what we're going to do is bring a couple of datas through this pipe and an HDMI. We're going to go up and over, down underneath the floor, and then more data, and that same HDMI will come up here and it'll fit into this conference table that's yet to be delivered. And in the case of someone having a laptop that wants to do a presentation on the large screen TV that'll be on the wall, they just plug into that HDMI cable. So that's something that's yet to be done. We're about to start on that come Monday. Moving on. Okay, so now we're in a section of the same office, other side of the floor, and we are still in the middle of roughing in. So what roughing in looks like for us is that the cables have been pulled to the office that they're going to live in, and they've been lengthed out just a little bit so that they can reach their faceplate, but they haven't been cut through the ceiling or connectorized yet. They also have not been made nice and neat, so they're not going to stay like this. That's what the rough part of roughing in is about. So each office should have its cable inside. We'll come in later and we'll finish that. So we'll just go down. So the other end of all this, I'll take you on a little walk. The other end of all of this right now is over here. So to make pulling a little bit easier, we pulled it from a more central location. The server room is on the other side of this wall. So we're going to bring all of this over through the wall later, but we don't want to set up our boxes. Setting up our boxes in the server room is a little bit counterproductive. We want to have a nice straight line to pull from. And so we have the boxes on a wheeled cart. We push the cart out to the center, and then we can see all the way down the hallway, and then we just pull all our cables through the ceiling, 8 or 9 at a time, and it's a lot faster that way. At the very end, after we've dressed all these cables, we'll just bring them in a single pull into the server room. So that's where we're at with the project overall. That's 2 days worth of work. The more boxes you bring, the faster it goes, and the more friends you bring, the faster it goes. All right, so we're talking backboard when last we were shopping. The backboard's up. So you can see it right there on the wall. There's nothing to it. It went right in, but the guys, when they put this up for me, did not drill out these holes. So I'm going to do that now. In order to do the drilling, what we're going to use is the drill bit that came with our Tapcons. We're going to use my DeWalt drill, and my DeWalt drill has a hammer mode, and that'll help me get through the concrete. So we just have to put this in the chuck, and when I drill this, I'm going to sink this into the concrete all the way. And the reason I'm going to do that is because if you look at these screws that we're going to use, we want to overshoot the length of the screw by about 50% or so, at least at this length. And the reason for that is when I'm screwing this in later, debris will start to push its way forward and it will get a blowout if I don't have this in with sufficient depth, if my pilot hole doesn't have somewhere for all that debris to go. Okay, so I've drilled my holes. It doesn't really look like much. It's still just a hole, just a black hole in that plywood, so there was no point filming that. And now I've brought out the nut driver. So the nut driver is where the pan head of this little fella fits, and then that way it doesn't slip when we're drilling it into position. So what we're going to do is just sink these for now about halfway so that we remember that we need to anchor them in the back of the wall cabinet that we're going to be installing. So this is just a reminder. They'll be in the way of the wall cabinet, and that way we'll remember, oh yeah, don't forget, secure it better. All right, here we go. One down. There we go. Two down. So that's not so bad, is it? So my go-to tools for working with concrete are going to be my Hilti cordless concrete nail gun. This is a BX3. And what this gun does is it takes these nails right here and it goes through various kinds of fasteners that can go onto the end of the gun head right there. And then you just pull the trigger and then bam, you've got yourself a fastener right there in the concrete. This is what I use to hang J-hooks, zip tie anchors, and other kinds of supports for my cable highway. It's an extremely expensive item, so unless you're like me doing this all the time, all day, every day, and you're frequently working with concrete, I would suggest just rent this from your local hardware store for the day and do as much damage as you can in the time allotted and then return it. That's a lot more cost effective. But if you're doing this all the time, this thing is actually really quiet to operate, so I don't have to try to clear the space or wait for after hours. I can sync all my supports during the working day, which helps me work more efficiently. My other go-to tool is this SDS masonry drill. This one is a 12 volt that I got from Milwaukee. And the SDS bits are this little fella here, and I've got on my bit like the depth pre-marked for the screws that we're always using. And this particular drill is very effective. I've had this one about 8 years now, and the only thing I've had to do is replace the bits from time to time. For today, I don't actually have the right diameter bit for the Tapcons that I bought, but that's okay. The Tapcons came with the bit, so I'm going to slap that into my DeWalt and we'll drill the holes in the wall that way. Okay, so the Hilti, as you can see, allows us to fasten these different anchoring points into our ceiling, and that gives us something that we can attach our bundle to in terms of Velcro or zip tie. And then that gives us a lot of flexibility when working in concrete. Otherwise, when you're working in concrete, you end up relying on luck, and that's not what you want. So if you're without tools, you're just sort of hoping that there's something there in the ceiling that you can use to anchor to. Whereas if you've got the right tools, you can create your own supports and it's quick and easy. We're gonna do some cleanup on this here. This is gonna need to be pulled a little straighter, so we'll be fixing that momentarily. The team has been quite quick at getting cables into position here, but they haven't looped this up to my satisfaction. So we're gonna be fixing this quite soon. So one of the ways I try to go above and beyond for the client is when I'm using my concrete nailer and I've got some cables traversing an area like this, I like to sink a fastener to the ceiling so that I have something to anchor my wires to so that they're not drooping. Previous to this fastener being here, the wires were laying on these hot and cold water pipes and this fire sprinkler pipe, which is,
You know, it's not to code, but it also looks terrible.
make sure to leave the zip tie loose so that I can still pull wires through. If I need to add one or two, the string will still have some movement here, so we don't cinch it down all the way.
One thing doing these videos has taught me is that you guys don't miss a trick. So I want to point out that this cable here is not anything that we are working with. This was left behind by the internet service provider, and I'm just going to ignore it. And I hope that you do too. So please don't beat me up in the comments about how sloppy this looks. The team was able to put up the chase pipes in between my various shots. The chase pipe is a 4-inch diameter EMT conduit that we've cut down to size. We then put on white insulating bushings, and then this becomes the transition for coming through the ceiling into the wall cabinet. If you're looking at all these zip ties and you don't like what you see, don't worry. Those were just there while we had to get the wires out of the way of the other tradespeople while they were painting and flooring and carpeting and all that. Now that that phase is done, we're going to convert all of these to Velcro. The cables in this bundle are slightly out of numerical order, so we're going to cut all of these zip ties, and then we're going to order these things correctly and then comb them and then apply the Velcro to keep these things under control and looking good. Once we have everything combed, we're going to feed it through the chase pipes, and then we're going to mount the wall cabinet and we'll be all set to terminate. Speaking of terminating, this is the rack that we're going to be installing on that wall. This is an 18U sized rack, and it's a little bit bigger than usual because I visited the client's office and I saw that there was quite a bit of equipment in their existing rack. So I wanted to be ready just in case they had more equipment going in than I was normally prepared to see. I like to assemble these in our shop ahead of time before we bring them on site to fix anything that was bent during shipping. These frequently show up with all kinds of dents, dings, and other things, and we've got mallets, blocks of wood, suction cups, hammers, all the stuff it takes to beat those out and make it flat again. I don't like to do that in the customer's space. Once that's all done, we'll transport it to the job site to put it on the wall.
Okay friends, we're back here at the job site. This is day 4 of working. There's been a wardrobe change. Let me take you through the space. So one thing that you saw last time is that the floor was not done. Some of the doors and ceiling walls were empty, opened up still. And now everything is carpeted and looks fantastic. The walls have been painted, the ceiling is closed up. So we're real happy with the progress here. And this, there we go, got some APs in position. One of the things that happens a lot when you're doing these kind of jobs is the other tradespeople, like the carpenters, the painters, the drywallers, or even the ceiling installers, they'll suddenly finish. They'll get like way ahead of you when you least expect it. So here's all the areas that were roughed in last time. Now they're done. So we don't have any more wires hanging in any of these rooms. Everything's been done and connectorized and is ready to be tested. We've even got the labels on. So we try to go as fast as we can, because what will happen is you'll just blink and the space will be move-in ready. It looks completely ready to move into, so we can't be dragging our feet. Let me take you over to the rack so we can talk about where we're at with that, because that's where the action is going to be for the remainder of the job. Okay, so here's the rack. This is what 4 days worth of work looks like. We've got about 96 wires by my count. There's about 96 total here. So we've got approximately a day and a half or so worth of work left to do, and then this will be completely terminated, tested, labeled. And we'll just talk about some of the things that we did here. So one of the things that we discussed last time, let me get in there, is sinking some extra anchors into the concrete. So we drilled those out with the Milwaukee SDS masonry drill, and then we secured that. So this cabinet is really in the wall. Like, I could do pull-ups on that. It's not going anywhere. The other thing is, you saw me put those pilot holes from last time, And there's the anchor that's holding this up. So we've got 4 extra anchors, not just the wood, but we also have this in the concrete, and that's going to help immensely with securing it. So right down here, we're likely to have a battery pack, which is, 40 pounds. We're gonna have some switches. The switches will probably add a good 10 pounds. And then all the cables themselves, and God knows who steps on this or sets, they do something up top where they lean on it or use it to anchor themselves, pull themselves up. So we have to be sure that it's done really well. In terms of doing these cables, so the zip ties are all temporary for cable wrangling. I'm going to replace that with Velcro very soon. What we like to do, right now it's after hours, so we're not yet, the boys haven't yet arrived to continue the work in this area, but one of the things I like to do is have a little consistency between the job assignment, which is terminating in this case, and the person who's doing it. So what we're looking to do here is have the same guy work on this for two days straight, if that's what it takes. So previous afternoon, he was doing this panel, got started, we interrupted, broke for the day, we start again, and the same guy picks up where he left off. If we trade which body is working on which thing, I find that the cables get a little bit chaotic. So we like to use one artist for each cable section. Now there will be one panel up at the top, then a cable manager, then the switch, then a panel, then a cable manager, then a switch. And by my count, there being about 96 items here, we may leave a little room for an extra panel and cable manager and switch layout just below. Like I said, when I visited the old tenant's space, they have quite a bit of equipment. So I want to be sure that we're leaving some room for them to install a couple of extra items. I'm going to assume there's a firewall, and a lot of times there is a voice over IP controller, or there is some sort of Wi-Fi controller. So we don't want to chew up the entire rack with our equipment. If I don't like the way that the cable managers end up looking like they're chewing up too much of that rack, then what we will do is remove them or move to like a smaller 1U. But otherwise, we'll be using the standard neat patch that I always like to deploy. And other than that, we're just going to put the doors on after we're done testing. And then I'm going to take a final shot for every one of you, and we're going to walk away. All right, I've waited till the end of the day, and I thought I would show you. It didn't look like much the last time you saw this, but it's finished now, so it doesn't take very long, only about a day. We've got the doors on, so let's go talk about what we've got here. So I will open this up so we can look around. I like to leave a couple extra cage nuts and screws and patch cords for the user. And then all these are tested and labeled. And then if we look on the underside, everything is nice and neat. It's really quite simple. It just takes a little bit of, shall we say, you just got to work slow and deliberately. So that's kind of what the process looks like when it's finished. And we'll just follow that cord up. All right, so you get an idea of what we're going for here. Final stage of this will be to get the switches in position and make sure that the internet is working. So I'm going to close that up for now. And we'll go get the network equipment, okay? All right, here's the final product of how this thing turned out. This is after 3 to 5 days worth of building and installing. So I didn't get a chance to configure the switches, and the reason for that, let me dig in here for you, is they didn't have the right switches in stock. So what they've done is they've loaded some temporary switches up here. So I'll go over with my own switches how we configure these things, and I'll show you how that works. So the internet's now working. This here is the primary
Let's get a good shot of that. This is the primary firewall. This is their LAN uplink, and they've got a fiber connection from their ISP. And then there's a special VoIP tunneling router right here. And then everything else is just standard switches with switch-to-switch uplinks. There's also a Wi-Fi controller that runs on this PC, and they use this PC as well for network monitoring and other tech support needs. So they've got the computer right here in the rack, and it's always available via remote. UPS ended up being temporary. So the UPS is desktop model and laid on top. And aren't we glad that we put that anchors in the concrete, because that heavy UPS being on top is not where that was meant to go. So good thing we've got strong anchors. That'll be replaced later with a rackable lithium one that's a little thinner and easier to position, but we'll see if in 5 years if this thing is ever moved. I have my doubts. This PoE switch, one of the downsides of having only temporary switches to work with is that none of the temporaries provide PoE, so there's a third switch whose only job is to light up the access points and any of the phones that require it. Most of the phones here in this office will be using power cords, however. That's how this phone vendor likes to do their work. All right, so that is the end result of this project. I might stop the video there, and then I will go get some switches, and then I will show you how I configure them for a standard office layout. And that'll be the end of it. So I appreciate you all being with me on this build. It's been a lot of fun. It's progressed rapidly, so I hope you get a sense of how quickly these things go by when you're working. Really appreciate everyone being with me on this one. I'll see you again real soon in the next one. Happy network building.